We did not receive any comments. There's a public comment period available on the website, and no comments were submitted prior to the cutoff period. We will go through the bond program status report. Just a quick update on a topic from our last meeting, which was the early design work at Raleigh Hills and then the budget increase to the BCA. Probably the major topic for this evening is looking at where we're at with our seismic projects and just the planning around that. And then a quick update on the long-range facility plan process. So I will open up the status report and turn it over to Mr. John Irwin.
Yeah, we'll go over that one first. Cool, thanks, Aaron. Good evening, everybody. So before we get into the bond status report, we wanted to kind of do a quick overview of what happened in the report last month, because we didn't have a meeting and we had a lot of kind of financial changes last month that we had been discussing in kind of weeks prior or months prior. And some of those finally kind of went into effect. So you can see this top section just kind of shows what the numbers were at in the December 2020 report. And so in our January 2021 report, we saw an uptick in our program reserve and as well as our program reserve estimate and complete. And the big changes for that is that we financially closed out Sato and Hazeldale, which was awesome achievement from the team. And so that added $328,000 into the program reserve. And then we transferred all our remaining contingency from the William Walker project, which was 1.59 million, into the program reserve. And as of the January report, that project hadn't been closed yet, but we had all this extra contingency that we knew we wouldn't need, so we moved it out of the project. And then as well as transferring money into the program reserve, we also transferred 500,000 out of the program reserve, and that went into the district-wide facility repair project to plus up the new school's post-warranty fund line item. And so we had talked about all those items with you guys, but we just wanted to make sure that we covered it since it was in the previous report. So you'll see kind of those reflected in the report we're about to cover as well.
Say, just for the future, I wonder if you could work, I appreciate the message and the graphics, but at least on my screen, it was so small that only about 5% of the screen had the information in it. I don't know if it's my computer or the way you guys are showing it.
Yes, I can zoom in, I think, here. Let's see.
All right, hopefully that helps.
That's better, sort of.
I think that's the most I can do.
All right. So this is our summary for the February 2020 report. And just so the timing is always kind of funny with this report, how we're always a month behind, but it's even funnier now because we're practically into April. So some of these line items that are on the budget and schedule perspective, we actually have updates for you guys later on. You'll recognize them from the agenda. So we'll kind of have some updates on some of these informational items. So after a really great month in January, where we added a lot of money to the program reserve, we added even more money into the program reserve in February, which was really great. So The overall program reserve increased by 471,000, and the reserve plus program contingencies increased by 465,000. And kind of the biggest piece of that is after we returned all that extra contingency from William Walker in January into the program reserve, we actually financially closed the project all the way in February. And there was additional money that was tied up in contracts that got closed out short and got released. So that project returned a additional 471,000 into the program reserve in February as part of its final financial closeout. And that's really exciting for us because that was the last of the K5s in the program. So all of the K5s are now closed. So it's really just awesome achievement for the team and for the bond. And so after that, we had a contingency decrease at ACMA to the tune of 223,000. And that was mostly due to some ADA compliance changes for the Performing Arts Center building. That's the existing building on the site that we didn't demo. We left it as it was, but there were some updates that needed to be made to make it ADA compliant. And then there was just some additional changes within the building. We had some changes to the flooring underlayment and our locker fronts. And then there was a projector for the commons that wasn't spec'd out in the original bid. So we had to incorporate installation of that. And then another really kind of good news story, the Five Oaks contingency increased by 221,000. And that was due to the contractor completing an internal cost reconciliation of the project. With all our CMGC projects, we've done a third-party audit. And so that's still happening right now for that project, but kind of as part of the prep work for that audit, the contractor did their own internal cost reconciliation, and we're able to return those unused contingency funds from the CMGC contract back to the project. And so we have a plan to use some of those funds. There's some additional deferred maintenance for the school that has come up that wasn't part of the scope, but we want to kind of do the work at the building to keep protect our investment. And so I think that's mostly going to be some roofing work that we're looking at getting done with those savings. And then we had heightened HVAC's budget increased by $300,000, and that was due to bid results. And just for everybody's information, we added here that we did receive 3 bids for the project, and so the low bid still required a budget increase to the project. And finally, for the budget perspective, Lowell High School Seismic's contingency decreased by 221,000. And that was due to some additional roof work that was outside the original scope of the project. There was an older portion of roofing with the building that wasn't failing when we started the project. And as of the end of the summer, after we had finished all our roof work, it started to fail and is no longer under warranty. So we had a lot of extra contingency in that project, so we're using some of that to complete those additional roof repairs. And so then going into the schedule perspective here, you can see Cooper Mountain Seismic completed the bidding process in February, and they received 5 bids for that project. And the winning bid was within budget and actually 500,000 below estimates. So that is going to take place this summer, and it's the last original seismic commitment for the bond. So that's pretty exciting that we're wrapping up kind of those original commitments, and also great that it came in below estimates and within budget. Security Upgrades has completed the fencing scope for the high schools, and the camera installation and testing is finishing up at the high schools. And then we awarded the design build contract for the additional cameras that'll take place at the middle schools and the elementary schools. The maintenance facility project has finalized design for the new swale. I know we've had a lot of discussions with this committee about that project, and they're still working through some revisions to the easement, but a completed package will be presented to the THPRD. Oh, sorry, I cut off myself here. Sorry, will be presented to THPRD at their April board meeting for their final stamp of approval. And then assuming permitting is approved, the phase 3 construction will begin in June. And finally, this was more kind of an informational item that kind of discussing what we had talked to you all about starting the early design for Raleigh Hills, and requesting that some of those held funds get released so that we can begin design efforts for a new Raleigh Hills construction would take place in a future bond. So just kind of talking about how we brought that to the school board, and then we were requesting a vote at the March 15th school board meeting. And so once again, this is where those dates the dates of the report and the date of this meeting come into impact. So we'll have an update for y'all, I think next on the agenda with how that went, but it went well for the bond program. And then finally here, challenges and opportunities. Just mentioning that we have submitted some additional grant applications to the state for seismic upgrade dollars at Mckinley and Bethany elementary schools. And we selected those 2 schools because they were high need and have upcoming roof replacements, so we can kind of marry that work together, which has gone really well for our seismic projects up to this point. There's a lot of efficiency that we can get from doing that kind of work at the same time. So I think we are supposed to hear back in April whether we get awarded those grants or not.
Hey, John, one question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
On the maintenance facility Swale, do we have to do that expensive stuff that we were hoping not to do? I can't remember what was the outcome on that.
Good question. So we are in pretty good shape there. We've pretty much come to an agreement with THPRD how to construct that swale on their property, which that's what we wanted. So I think it actually goes to their board for approval tonight, if I'm not mistaken. So as long as that gets approved, we'll be in good shape to be able to finish that work this summer, which was the least expensive, least ongoing operational expense solution. That's what we wanted.
Good for us. Okay, nice work.
Hey, just a question on the seismic upgrades. Are most of those structural upgrades that require putting in some shear walls or structure that would sustain shear in case of an earthquake? And I asked the question because there's a mention of the roofs several times, and I didn't know the connection between that.
Yeah, good point. So I'm going to talk a bit about seismic a bit later, but I won't really address this. So I'll explain. So when we look at seismically reinforcing a building, there's kind of 3 components to it. If you simplify it, you need to have adequate footings and foundations. You need to have the walls that have to be attached to the footings. And then you have to have your roof level diaphragm, which also adds to your lateral force resistance system. And you have to have the roof to wall connections. And then typically there's strapping on the roof. So there's a lot of efficiencies for us to doing a roof project or doing a seismic project at the same time as a roofing project. What happens if you don't do that is you end up having to cut into pretty big areas of the roof to install the roof to wall connections and strapping to form that diaphragm. Usually it's around the perimeter, but it's up being a pretty significant impact. And so there's a ton of efficiencies to doing at the same time, and in which we'll talk a little bit about that later too.
Okay, thanks, Aaron.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, any other questions on this? Okay, let's go back to the slideshow. Okay, so this is just a quick update on a couple of things. Josh, did you want to give this one?
Yes, I'll cover that. So they were briefly mentioned, but I'll go into a little bit more detail. So at the March 15th school board meeting, we presented the Raleigh Hills pre-design work, that $1 million that we had talked about at our bond accountability meeting, and that was approved by the board. So an update for you is that we have an RFP out for the pre-design services, and that the proposals are due April 23rd. We expect award by June 1st, as it's noted there. The RFP link is there, so when we get you the slide presentation, you can click the link and it'll take you to the RFP. But what you'll see in the RFP when you pull it up is there are, we've got pre-design services in phase 1, and then there's phase 2, which will give you more of the engineering and the architectural type documents. So we have an option for phase 2 in this RFP, but what's been approved is for phase 1 pre-design services, and we're going to go up to $1 million for that. So the project itself, in this current bond, the project hold is $11.8 million, and we're going to use again $1 million of that for this pre-design services in phase 1. So that's good news. Again, thank you for your support with that project, and that's how we're moving forward with that. Moving on to the BCA budget, we also presented that at the March 15th school board meeting, and just a reminder, we did 2 transfers for the BCA. We did a $12 million transfer in May of 2020, and then this most recent one, we asked for a transfer of right at a little over 14 million. And so that was approved. And it's noted on there, we haven't put that in the financial report because the report only goes through February, but we'll make sure when you get the next report that it's noted in there. And so we're planning that work. And so those are all just kind of updates from since the last bond accountability meeting that we've had. Are there any questions about that? We covered that kind of like last time and went through it. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Yeah, thanks. No, that's really great news about Raleigh Hills. I just wanted to ask you, Josh, how are you intending to work with the community? What is your community engagement approach for the pre-design services? Because clearly that is a pretty critical component to the ultimate success of the project.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Cheryl. So in the RFP for that phase 1 that I talked about, there are, let me take a look here. I think there are 3 community meetings that we've scheduled to get that input. And so that's how we're going to get that community involvement in here. And Aaron, I'm looking for it now. Do you know how many meetings we have scheduled for that?
That sounds about right. Yeah, it's 3 or so. Yeah, I definitely want to have a really robust
Right. Yep.
process for these.
It's 3. Plan, attend, and provide materials for at least 3 additional community meetings. So we have that in there.
So it's just through those meetings that they will get input from the community?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And like I said, phase 2 goes into more of the design and construction admin part of it, and that will be an option. It's not approved. That's just an option. We have that as just from a contracting perspective of being able to leverage it if we want to move forward with that.
Josh, just let me step in here for a moment.
Sure.
Cheryl, when I was doing the various neighborhood meetings and when I was talking with the Raleigh Hills, Denny, Whitford, and then the Raleigh Hills PTA or PTO, there was a lot of interest in understanding and being involved in the design process. So it will be incumbent upon us to advertise those opportunities pretty broadly through the NAC, through the CPO, and through the PTO. Also, just to be clear that we already are trying to get our ducks in line so that we can then interact with the city, with Washington County Clean Water Services, and the road is going to be the most tricky part, and the access to the site. So we want to have those issues resolved very early in the process.
Any other questions? Thanks, Cheryl, for asking. Thanks, Steve, for jumping in. Go ahead, Renu.
Yeah, so will all the community input be received before you actually choose the people who are going to do the design work, or when will, what is the timing sequence there?
The community meetings are part of the pre-design service work. So that's part of it. That's in the scope, if I'm understanding your question, Renu. That'll be part of that work that they perform for us,
Oh,
getting
okay.
that input to have
And
these community meetings.
that is, the people who will propose the design are going to meet with the community. Is that how it works?
Yes.
With Beaverton School District staff, right? It's a team. It's a whole team that will be
Correct. Right. We're the owner, but this is a consultant that we've hired to schedule these community meetings. We're going to be representative in those meetings.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Josh and Steve, I'll just offer something if this is of interest to you. In the last couple of years, we have really been modifying our approach to community engagement with city planning processes and various efforts to ensure that we are getting feedback and input from a really wide variety of the community. And what that means is we've got to do things differently. We have to go meet people on their ground, so to speak, not always expect them to come to our meetings, our open houses, especially in this virtual time. And we've been using a number of external consultants who have relationships with different parts of the community, community groups that might necessarily be formalized like a NAC or CPO, but helping us talk with people who have ideas. They just don't normally participate in these kinds of processes because they don't understand them, or they're not comfortable, or maybe language is a barrier. I just think there's a lot we could be doing. And it's a big part these days of funding that you receive. You know, for example, if you want funding from Metro for open space improvements to the property, or potentially transportation improvements, they have pretty significant expectations of community involvement. And I think these are all very right things for us to be doing as a community. I just wanted to share, I know the county's thinking about this, and I think every city in the region is really thinking about it. And if you would like, we'd be happy to sit down and have a conversation with you about some of the things we've learned.
Absolutely. That'd be great, Cheryl. Thank you for bringing that up.
I think that's really important. I attended that meeting where we presented to that Raleigh Hills group that we were going to change our plan and build a new school for them in the future, but it's not going to be a part of this bond thing. And I know a number of these people personally, and I can tell you that if we just have meetings and say, well, that's how we got our input, I think we're going to fall short because of the sensitivity that this has been deferred. And so I really endorse Cheryl's suggestion to pick up on some of their experience and try to apply that here.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, and I definitely agree too. You know, I've learned, you know, over the past few years, and you know, in the current bond, we had several projects where it was kind of like that, where you know the outreach, you know, you're going and doing outreach with kind of, you already know what you're going to do, and you're just presenting it to people. But being able to go out with an open mind and actually genuinely solicit input, I think is super valuable, and it would be a missed opportunity to not do that. So we absolutely will be doing that pretty heavily in this project and with the Beaverton High School project for sure.
Yeah, thanks again, Cheryl. We can reach out to you and get some more of that input. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, next topic. All right, seismic projects plan. And before I start backing away here, let me just show you guys as a reminder what this looks like on our. So this is the page that tracks our seismic projects in the bond, in the 2014 bond. You can see there's 5 schools listed here with projects. And as John mentioned earlier, we're basically done with all the projects seismically, except for Cooper Mountain, which we're in the process, we're doing pre-construction right now and getting ready to do that. You'll see here that Aloha and Beaver Acres both finished with a pretty healthy contingency. And so that's kind of the focus of what we're going to be talking about right now. Right now there's about $4.5 million in contingency available for seismic upgrades. Of that, John also talked a bit about school. So at Aloha, we did 2 things kind of at the same time. We did a major seismic upgrade and a roof replacement. The roof replacement wasn't the entire school. It was most of it. It was probably 75% of the school, but there were a few areas of the school that had been remodeled within the last 20 years and had a different vintage of roof on them. They had like a TPO membrane roof, and so those weren't dealt with during the most recent remodel because it wasn't thought that they needed to be dealt with. They were newer, they were totally different. However, this last winter kind of shot that theory, and we had multiple leaks in multiple different areas of the building of the roof that had not been handled. So our plan right now is to use some of that contingency to go in and finish those areas of roof at the school. So the school will basically have almost 100% new roofing throughout. Both of the new areas, I believe, are overlays. We can just go right over the top of the old TPO with the new TPO. It's pretty quick and easy and relatively affordable relative to the rest of the last year's work, which was a tear off. That gets a lot more messy and a lot more expensive. So we're planning on doing that this summer. And that brings us down to about $3.5 million available for seismic projects. And fortunately, we have some really good information to help us with this. We have had multiple reports. I think we've presented on it several times, but we've had KPFF go out and do some assessments for us. Quite a bit of seismic information. It's all on our website. But it's all in order to help us plan, like we call it the seismic roadmap. How do we get all of our buildings seismically safe? There are a number of ways we can do it, and we need to look at all of those options. So kind of the 2 big things that we're looking at to getting the district seismically safe is either replacing or renovating buildings. So we would, of course, replace an old building. You know, Raleigh Hills and Beaverton High School are the perfect examples. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to go in and spend a ton of money to seismically retrofit Beaverton High School. The cost estimates to do that are like 30 to 40 million to do a seismic retrofit of the school. And when you start talking about numbers like that, it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You really should just replace the whole building. And so we have identified a number of schools that fall in that category, and that, you know, it's the older buildings, and that's the approach there. Other buildings, which aren't that old, fall in the category of renovations. So we want to go in and do, similar to how we did at Aloha and Beaver Acres. We want to go in and retrofit the schools to be seismically safe. And then we also have quite a few that don't need any upgrades whatsoever, mostly the newer buildings. So it is most efficient for us to go in and kind of do everything at once, but that's not always possible. Sometimes we're having to do incremental improvements to schools. So the volume 5 that KPFF put together for us, it went through and shows us what are the worst performing areas in the district, which sections of buildings are the worst, because we have a lot of buildings that were constructed over many years. And so in many cases, certain areas of the building will be fine and other areas of the building are highly unsafe. And so if we're going to look at doing incremental improvements, we want to focus on those areas that are just unsafe right now. This is a neat little map from the long-range facilities plan that shows just kind of how all the different schools stack up against each other. So you can see, the higher the score, the better you are. We're kind of targeting having things fall within that damage control range. So you can see that the schools that do fall within that range are probably the ones that we're not going to have to do any work at. And the ones in the dark blue here, these are the ones we need to address. So there's a couple of things going on here. Right now, we are waiting, as John mentioned, we've submitted seismic grant applications to the state of Oregon for a couple of schools. Those schools are Bethany and Mckinley elementary schools. And I'll show them to you again where they fall on here. They're kind of on the left-hand side of the elementary category here. So McKinley scores a 52 and Bethany is a 58. So both pretty low. We picked these two schools because they were recommended by KPFF as being two that would score highly through the SRGP process. And they're also buildings of high value. Like they're not as old as some of the other ones that have really bad scores. So the goal here was to look at how we could spend that $3.5 million at sort of the worst performing areas. Unfortunately, it's kind of hard to do until we know what's going to happen at Bethany. We're hoping to get that that grant award from the state for Bethany, and if we do, that will save us a lot of money. So this chart here on the left is kind of what we're hoping for. This is our goal, that we're not going to have to spend a lot of our bond money on Bethany because we'll get that $2.5 million grant from the state, and it lets us spread around the money across quite a few other projects. So some of those other projects are additional planning and design for seismic upgrades and doing the SRGP applications. It's quite an involved process to put together these applications. So we wanted to have some set aside for that. Sexton Mountain Gym was identified as one of the worst areas in the district. I mentioned in volume 5, it was among the schools that we want to keep of high value. The gym at Sexton Mountain performs pretty bad, and so we want to be able to go in and take care of that. Similarly, the Capitol Center cafeteria, these grommets, I thought that was funny to call it that, but this is multiple schools. So each of those letters stands for a different school. And these are generally vestibules, like we have breezeways and vestibules at schools. And a lot of times they're just glass, and that glass isn't shatterproof or like seismically resistant. So it would be going in and replacing it with something more safe. And then last on the list is the auditorium at Sunset High School. was actually red on our map. Relatively easy fixes in there. It's mostly roof to wall connections. So going in and putting angle iron and making a connection there so the building all moves together. And you'll notice I skipped over number 4 here, which is the West TV gym. I put $0 on here. We actually have another plan on how to address that. The West TV gym is also a very poor performing, dangerous area in the district, and we do want to deal with it. We think we're going to be able to deal with it through the BCA right now, though. We have a few projects in there that are coming in pretty well under budget at the school. So like a window replacement, we're looking at reallocating most of that to go towards doing the seismic upgrades in the gym.
And Aaron, just for the committee's awareness, the price tag on the West TV gym is very low. I mean, relative to other projects, 150, I think is.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. 150,000. So the gym at West TV, standalone facility, not tied to the main building, other than a kind of an overhang, and just having some shear walls inside, added strength there to help take that gym out of the red and improve the rating for that. So like Aaron said, we're looking to look at taking BCA money to help take care of that seismic project. That's why the line item is blank in this plan.
Yep, thanks. And then the scenario on the right here is, this is really just what happens if we don't get the grant award at Bethany. We plan on using the seismic money to fund that project at Bethany. And then the rest of the budget we would just use as available on these other projects like Sexton Mountain. And then my last slide here on the topic, why Bethany? It's like I said, there's a lot that goes into it, but it's the lowest rated school that will not be replaced anytime soon, that falls within the available budget, and also has a roof project scheduled this summer. So Dick, you asked about that earlier, but we already had a roof project scheduled at Bethany, and so this is part of why we ended up submitting the grant application. We were able to use the money going towards the roof as part of the matching funds required for that project, which adds a lot of efficiency and hopefully adds to our chances of getting that award. So the timing right now, unfortunately, is a little bit awkward because we're going to do the seismic work this summer, but we're still waiting on the state to hear about those awards. So hopefully we'll hear soon, but we're planning on proceeding with the seismic upgrades there regardless. Okay, that's it for seismic. That was kind of a mouthful. So does anybody have any questions? I can talk all day long about seismic upgrades.
Aaron lives in those volumes 1 through 5 from KPFF. So we, just to kind of wrap it up for the committee, Aaron talked about $4.5 million. It was 2 committee meetings ago. We talked about a proposal of, instead of taking remaining money from seismic projects and putting it into program reserve, we were going to take the $4.5 million and apply it to seismic. So this is just kind of that wrap up of that plan, getting us to what we just talked about today. So just wanted to kind of summarize that for you and bring you up to this point. And I think we have a great plan. Aaron, thanks for covering that. Any questions from the committee or the team? I don't see anybody. All right.
Okay, cool. So the last one is really just to tee up a discussion for next month. And I'll go through this real quick, but I'm going to hand it off to Jeff Hammond, who's on here. I don't know if you all have had a chance to meet Jeff yet, but Jeff is a senior project manager on our team. So he manages projects and he also supervises a group of project managers. He's going to talk about the process that we went through last year. This is actually kind of mostly for the benefit of the new committee members, which I don't even think we have any on here tonight. So this might be a bit repetitive for you all, but we're going to do it anyway. So from John's report, you will have seen that there's about $7.5 million in contingency, bond program contingency sitting there. So we need to start thinking about allocating that. We're getting pretty close to the end of the bond program. So we're kind of going to be up against the wall to spend money on projects. And so we really need to get going on identifying what those projects are. Good problem to have, certainly. There are a few things I will note here that are considerations kind of before we start looking at added projects. We know that Tumwater Middle School, so that's our new middle school's name. Timberland Middle School is called Tumwater Middle School. We're going to need to add a little bit to the budget there in order to complete the outfitting, the FF&E of the school. So not a whole lot, 300,000. Bo's classroom edition is something we've been talking about quite a bit. If that ends up moving forward and getting approved by the school board, it would need to come out of this $7.5 million. And then we have 2 added projects that we approved last year. So we'll look, Jeff will go through the chart from last year here in a minute, but 2 of the main ones that we did were cameras at all schools and then classroom walls, largely at certain elementary schools. These were the classrooms that were open, like the open concept, and we're going in and adding walls and doors to all classrooms in the district. It helps, well, it's necessary in order to lock down, like lockdown, and it also helps a lot just with the educational adequacy of the space because it keeps the classrooms quiet. Both of those have the potential to need more budget at some point. The number, you know, as we talked about, the number last year's was kind of preliminary. It was a guess based on what we knew at the time. I think the camera budget is in pretty good shape, but it's starting to look like the classroom walls project may need to be beefed up a little bit. So that would need to come out of the program reserve as well. So with that, I will hand it off to Jeff to talk about.
Hey, excuse me, a question on that, Aaron, and I'm not sure this is the point to ask the question, but with schools restarting, hopefully in the next 6 months or so, are there any capital projects to make them safe from a COVID-19 basis? And I'm thinking of HVAC or physical barriers or anything like that.
Yeah.
And is that something that we need to think about in this realm?
I can jump in there. And so good question, Dick. And we, yes, we actually have projects that are HVAC related, you know, that would help decrease the risk of transmission through our systems. And we know through the facility condition assessment that we did with Mckinley what those HVAC projects are to help improve our systems. You know, and so we're targeting increased runtime in our systems. These are all things that are recommended by ASHRAE. How do you reduce the risk? So you increase your runtime, you increase your filter rating, you increase outside air, and kind of looking at those key areas. We know that older equipment, you're running it longer, it's more susceptible to failure. So we want to, you know, get newer equipment in as best we can. So using the FCA, we have those priority projects for HVAC specifically. That's got that COVID support to that. So we could look at opportunities with the program reserve as one avenue. The other avenue that we're working with the district, Mike Schofield, our deputy superintendent for our financial, we've got the through the CARES Act. The CARES Act is that COVID-19, the Relief and Economic Security Act that provides money to schools. It's called the ESSER fund. And with that fund, we're getting some money coming here in the summer. And so again, looking at opportunities between the bond and then looking at this CARES money, probably gonna lean on the CARES money more to help with the HVAC equipment. So we know that Barnes gym doesn't have good ventilation. We wanna address that one with this CARES money. We know that West TV that we talked about for seismic also doesn't have good ventilation, so we want to include that in there as well. So priority for those projects will come from that CARES money. But if there's an opportunity to prioritize it with bond program reserve, we're gonna look at that as well. So we're doing that planning now to kind of, what are the priorities from a COVID lens, and then is there enough money within the CARES Act money to cover that? And if not, then do we have to look at potentially a program reserve? So that prioritization planning is still, we're in the process of that now.
Josh, this is Tom Quillen. I just have a follow up on that. Do we know or have estimates of what the net of the CARES money will be for Beaverton?
Well, yeah, Tom, good question. For us specifically in our operations and maintenance team, we're looking at about 20 million that we're planning for. So that's great news. Quite a bit of money for us to look at. And that, again, that's just for us within our facilities development and maintenance team. And so we're working that plan now.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. So Dick, does that help answer kind of your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you. And I thanked you, but I had my mute on, so you didn't feedback. I appreciate that.
So Dick, I think a good topic for next meeting would be to kind of cover what that plan looks like and how we're going to target the CARES money versus, potentially that overlap within program reserve. And we did put together a process last year. We got the help, through the committee, Brian Kennedy. We looked at the Minneapolis Parks and Rec system, and we developed our own process to how to use program reserve. Now you have this pandemic that we're in, and so how does that change our process and our thinking? And we have a safety category, and Jeff will cover this, but that's, again, just some things that we need to look at.
Yeah, I think that's a good topic.
Okay.
Josh, question for you and Aaron both. If you can go back to that slide. The classroom walls, and Aaron, I couldn't hear everything you said, but we've talked about classroom walls since the beginning of the bond project, and here we are coming to the end. And I know of at least 2 schools that they have wide open schools. They've got kindergartners that are wide open to the upper grade levels for an elementary school. And it sounds like you're saying classroom walls might be at the bottom of the wish list here. That also would be a COVID issue too, because they can't separate, they can't put people into separate rooms when it's all one big room.
Yeah, Tom, I think to go ahead, Aaron. Go ahead.
Sorry, they're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
So, no, it's not at the bottom of the list. So it was an added project. It was never originally included in the bond, but we added it kind of last go around. So we're doing it.
Yep.
What we're saying is we might need to increase that budget. And if we do need to increase that budget, we need to increase it before we look at adding other additional projects. So it's first in line.
Okay, it wasn't in the original budget. I realized it was on the list that's been called any number of things over the last 8 years. It was a part of that. I know Carl Mead is acutely familiar with it, and we had conversations on many occasions. So that one just kind of jumped out when you were talking about it.
Yep, absolutely. No, we're doing, I think 4 or 5 schools this summer, and then hopefully the balance of them next summer.
Okay.
Okay, with that, Jeff, you can take it away.
Sure, yeah, thanks. Again, I want to introduce myself. I'm Jeff Hammond, Senior Project Manager in Facilities. This is the second time I've had a chance to attend one of these meetings, so it's good to see you all again, and glad to meet those of you that are here that hadn't met me before. So all I want to do is just review the process that for these added projects that we went through previously to select these projects, and a little bit about how we will, look to do that as we move forward. And like Aaron mentioned, this was kind of to go back over how we did that previously, and then for the new members, and then what we're going to do as we move forward. So last year we scored the projects in a matrix using these 3 scoring methods. So safety, security, operational impact, and then community impact. And of each of those 3, we had 3 components that scored from 0 to 5 points based on these metrics that you see here. And one of these things, like we just mentioned, maybe we plug in COVID into some of the safety and security metrics as we move forward to next year's projects that we're looking to add. So what we did is we took these metrics and developed, last year came up with these projects here. In yellow is the additional projects that we added. Thanks, Aaron. To the program. So you've got security paging and notification systems, the classroom walls that we just talked about, a couple of plumbing repipe systems at 2 schools, and then security cameras. So what we look to do is, so you'll see the schools that kind of scored higher coming in after those would probably be schools and projects that we look to add in next year. But we may add some additional criteria that moves some of these projects up a little further based on what we know today versus what we knew then. So, yeah, was there any questions on that process? Or I know most of you have seen this before, so this isn't new information.
So just a reminder, everything in yellow, we've asked for that approval and we're moving forward with that. So Tom, again, I know it wasn't part of the original bond programming, but that classroom wall project is moving forward, like Aaron said, and we're anticipating we're going to need more funding for it, which we'll have to pull from the reserve here, and we'll have that as a topic if we need to in the future.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Jeff. So yeah, like I said, we're gonna redo this list, resort it, probably add in some new projects, probably take off a few that are either no longer valid or maybe are covered in the planning for the next bond. So the timing gets a little bit complicated there, but we're going to look at bringing a new list forward next month. Okay, and then the last topic here is just a quick update on long-range facility plan and bond planning. So we have been in the process of doing a lot of community outreach. Mostly Steve has been doing this, but Josh and I have been doing them as well. Pretty much all PTOs, all NACs, you name it, we have been there. We have some really neat videos, which I believe we reviewed last time. Doing a lot of outreach, getting a lot of feedback. I think I saw that we had close to 2,000 people respond to our survey that we had. So a lot of good information there. Right now, we are in the process of our consultant, Malum, and Steve's team is putting this information together into the long-range facilities plan. So this will go to the school board for adoption in April, May timeframe. And then following that is when we'll start looking at a recommendation for a capital measure. So there are a couple of different options that we're looking at right now, which I think we all actually reviewed in this group before.
Aaron, excuse me, this is Tom. Yeah. Just on the prior slide on the with regard to that feedback and the outreach for the community that will get rolled up to the school board in April, May, that would likely be interesting to this committee too, if that's something that you could share after it's released to the school board, of course, but if you could share that with this committee, I think that would be interesting for us to hear the sort of tenor and type of feedback that you're getting from the community. That would be useful. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Super good feedback. And in fact, that would be a really good topic for our meeting next month. I think Steve has that available. And in fact, I was just looking at, correct me if I'm wrong,
so
here,
let me-
Steve, but you've got it all ready to go.
Let me jump in here. Aaron, I appreciate you trying to give what is the absolute most interesting thing on this agenda short shrift. We should be talking about this for hours. But all kidding aside, yeah, I'm going through and trying to summarize the range of comments that we received. And as you can imagine, they're all over the board. But as Aaron said, there's been a lot of really good positive feedback. Granted, none of this is a scientific survey and is something that we're going to have to do later on. But the, we did 47 presentations at different meetings. And when we were going into the detail about why we were looking at different projects, people started nodding their head and understanding. And so that's part of what we're going to need to do is get out there and tell our story to the community. But that's going to start after the board adopts the plan, which will be, May, June of this year. And we are doing a board work session on April 5th on the long range facilities plan. And, I invite you to come and listen to that meeting. This is intended to be a dialogue between board members to really kind of start wrestling with some of the bigger topics for the plan.
Thank you. Look forward to reading more. Thanks.
Okay, so that was, that pretty much covered it. Here was the list if you wanted to see that again or had any questions. But right now, this hasn't been decided yet, but we're kind of on track for a May 2022 election at this point. But that still has to be decided. Okay, well, with that, that is the end of the agenda. So if there's any other questions, happy to look at that. If you have any topics we'd like to discuss for April, kind of a short turnaround between meetings here. So those tend to be pretty quick. But if you have any topics you want to add, I will add what Tom suggested. Cheryl, it looks like you've got something.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to what Steve was joking about earlier. I'd love to have a more in-depth conversation at our April meeting about the long-range facility plan. You will have come out of your board meeting. It'll be good to understand the comments and the direction you're getting from the board. And a couple of thoughts. Obviously, we're good ambassadors for the school district in our various capacities. So it's, I think, helpful for us to know. And then I think we'd all be keenly interested in it, given our background working with you on the back, and be happy to give you thoughts and ideas as well. So I'm excited. I can't wait to have that conversation. And all the schools are in Beaverton, right? Not Washington County. They're in Beaverton.
I want 5 hours for that agenda.
I was just going to say,
Yeah,
we're going to have to probably have Steve Sparks over multiple meetings, so just be prepared. So.
Oh no, you need me in one big bite.
I guess as a board member, I would, and the long range facility plan that we're trying to get public feedback on during this time of all Zoom meetings, I would welcome this informed committee's feedback on it. It is something that future boards and future Beaverton School District employees will be living with for 10 years. And I know, Tom, that you probably feel that keenly, and certainly anybody else who deals in public planning does as well. But I can't think of a group that I would more like feedback from than this very informed group who you definitely understand the need is far greater than the funding, and I'm sure every group that Steve meets with thinks, yeah, we need those things. But the place the rubber really is going to hit the road is, you know, how do these things get funded? How do we prioritize them? And as we look towards the next 10 years, is everything on this list that should be, whether it's in Beaverton or Washington County, you know. So let's give it a lot of time.
Yeah, thank you both for saying that. I agree. It's going to be very interesting. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Well, let me reopen the agenda here. So I think, I guess we're adjourned now. And then the next one is Wednesday, April 28th. So I will see you all then.